for images, they're going to see artifacts in there as well, like you would for temporary internet files. The next one we look at is the Wii. Real briefly about the Wii, the only thing to really note here is the 512 NAND flash storage. That's where OS and game save stuff. Again, it's really not a lot of space. Getting to the storage, you can use legacy GameCube cartridges, or you can use an SD card. Aside from normal pictures, SD cards can be formatted to save games. And again, the 512 meg NAND storage contains the OS. It's all encrypted, by the way, with AES 128 CBC. Unfortunately, I don't know who thought this would be a good design decision, but the decryption keys are on the NAND flash with the drive. So it's pretty trivial to decrypt the whole darn thing. To access the storage, you have two choices. I mean, you could rip the thing apart and just go, crazy with a soldering iron, or there are plenty of exploits you can use. Banner bomb. I know there was I think they patched it now. There was a Legend of Zelda hack that you could use to get to what you needed. What I wound up doing is I just procured a copy of Hack Me. I used the Banner Bomb exploit. You install a replacement. You dump the NAND. You dump the NAND right to an SD card, and you have your little boot me menu. And then from there you dump it. Creates a file just called nan.bin, and it creates a separate file called keys.bin. It's intelligent enough to create the key file for you. So you just use a separate utility to go through and decrypt it. And I make a note to this website. These guys do a lot of good work with Wii hacking and all that. So if you're ever curious, I'd highly recommend checking those guys out. What's on the NAND? Even decrypted, there's really not a lot. I mean, 512 megs of storage is just not a lot of space to begin with. Really, there's some things you'd like to focus on. If you go back to the previous link, they actually have a list of all the directories and what they mean and what you're going to find in there. Shared to, these are a couple of directories to note. Game saves, config, stuff like that. Network config is stored in plain text. So if you connect to Wi-Fi, right? At home, I use WPA2, and in clear text, it's got my SSID and password and all that fun stuff. And WeConnect, for some odd reason, it likes to store your email. Now, the Wii I bought this used from somebody else. So I don't know why, I don't know who thought it'd be a good idea, but it will store emails, sent and received. So here from the previous owner, you can see that, him and his girlfriend were, well, because I know the guy and his girlfriend, they were talking. She's like, hey, I love you back. So why, it stores email, couldn't tell you, but it is on there. And I guess forensically, if you're doing a forensic investigation, I don't know anybody who really uses the Wii to communicate, but I guess the possibility always exists, right? Wrapping up, there's really no security like the Xbox 360. You're really not going to see a whole heck of a lot. The best you're going to get is game saves, browsing. You're going to get the avatars and stuff like that. Look out for SD cards. And again, really not a lot you can do. PS3, briefly. Is that all right? Just kind of last thing to note. Again, the last bullet point is full disk encryption. Before I get to that. Getting to the hard drive, it is the easiest hard drive to get to. I mean, for the PS3 Slim, the one that we looked at here, it's literally a little flap and a screw, and you pull it out. And you can easily upgrade. You can buy, a 600 gig hard drive, easily stick it in, turn it on, and it'll do its thing. And no more other OS support. I'll get into that in a bit. What's on the hard drive? Who knows? Like I said, the entire thing is encrypted. And there hasn't been any way to really break it. And once they got close, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the GeoHoff exploit, was able to get access to hypervisor, and Sony's knee-jerk reaction, of course, was to patch it and just, okay, no more other OS support. So it's kind of theorized is that the decryption is stored in one of the SPEs of the cell processor. Again, since there's no documentation, it's really no way for us to confirm that. Looking at the raw bits isn't going to help. Again, it's just a bunch of gibberish. PS3, if it's not a slim model, and it hasn't been updated, and there's a way you can determine what patch level it is just by looking at like a PCAP dump. You could install Linux. It used to have other OS support, and that's easy to get to. But if you really want to determine whether or not the other OS is on, again, that's just like the Wii and the 360. Plug it in, turn it on, and there you go. Other OS version info. If you were to do kind of like if you had a PCAP dump, you're going to see it's going to go out. It's going to do check for updates and stuff like that. And it's going to download this PS3 update list.txt, and it'll tell you, what version it's running at. And it'll check. There's like a pup file that you can download. So if any reverse engineers are out there want to figure out what's on these updates, it's really easy because you can just go download it right to your PC. Wrapping up, turn it on, and go. Traditional file analysis, really not a no-go. Most of it's really outside of a traditional forensics investigation. I mean, if you wanted to crack the case, install a mod chip, and kind of go crazy with it, you're more than welcome to. But if you're to do like a forensics investigation for an actual case you're working on, you're really likely not to do that. Now we leave the consoles. We're going to get server side. There's a lot of game servers you guys can host. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Unreal, SourceDS. What is it and why? Again, SourceDS stands for Source Dedicated Server. Anybody can freely host any games. You don't even have to buy the games. You can just download it and you can host your own game. It runs on both Windows and Linux. It's multi-platform. And obviously there's a lot of games. For this, we focused on Left 4 Dead 2. All other SourceDS games are pretty much the same. Again, it's a huge understatement. I mean, I'm really just kind of glossing over it, but you guys get the idea, I hope. Steam and Source, a primer, just real briefly, it's multi-platform. The one thing to note is, they reported in January, there's over 25 million active users. So it's not something that's esoteric. There's a lot of people that use this. There's a lot of people that play that. And there's a lot of information that, that could be useful to a forensics investigation if you were to find this installed on a system. So what? Compromised box with this server, it's not as unlikely as you may think. It's actually pretty common if you find a compromised box. You're going to find not all the time, but chances are there may be a video game server that's installed. I've seen it a few times. I know some of my coworkers have seen it quite a few times as well. Now, Steam itself, it generates a lot of logs, both client and server side. And what can you get from this? IP addresses, Steam IDs, time spent playing, and typed conversations if it's enabled. The only thing to note here is the Steam client. Here you have the UDP ports 2700 or 27,000 to 27015. That's the only thing to really note. Just kind of put it in here for your reference. Directory structure for the SourceDS server, it's very similar across NIX and Windows. Windows, the only real difference is Windows is going to be in the program files directory, whereas Linux, it might be more of a custom path. Now, non-Steam servers exist, packages installed, like the earlier example I provided with the IP addresses of the admin mod logs. Now, like I said, we were able to trace all that fun stuff back. All those IPs went back to Russia. We had the Steam IDs. We were able to look it up. And I think we'll get to that slide here in a minute when I talk about the Steam community pages. Logs, again, that's where they were located. Really not a lot to really report there. And there's a screenshot of that. What's on the logs? Your log files are going to start out like this. It's going to launch the configuration file first. So if you were to just open it up initially, you're going to see a bunch of gibberish that really means nothing to anybody other than it's the configuration. You might be able to see, the Archon password or the contact information of the server admin. But again, if you compromise the box, you're really not going to put valid. I would hope not. You're not going to put valid contact information in there. Continued, what's in the logs? Here we can see people connecting. When they're connecting, when they disconnect, their names and their Steam ID. Continuing on, the Steam ID, this really is a wealth of information. I imagine that some marketing guy just really loves the whole concept of Steam. It provides, again, a lot of information. Steam IDs, they're in that format, and you can easily look them up. If you have a Steam ID, there's a lot of different websites you can go to, or you can just Google it, and it may take you right to the page. Now, if you have somebody's Steam ID, you can go to their Steam community page. Now, unless they have this disabled, you're going to get a lot of information about this individual. You're going to have their name, the games they play, how often they play them, when they play them, and all of their friends and who they play them with. It's all there, and it's all publicly accessible, and it could be useful to a forensics investigation to give you an idea as to what these users are doing on the system or how often they play. And now, there's our friend again. Wrapping it up, if you believe that there is a video game system that's installed on here, I mean, obviously if you have a server and you're doing a forensics investigation, there's a lot of places to get good information. I mean, you have your event logs, you have your file analysis, just standard forensic methodology. But the logs, or the video game server itself, it's a very small footprint of the overall server, and it can provide a wealth of information as to the activity and the general usage of this server. Again, the configuration file, you can find the server admin contact information, and again, it's a very small footprint to look for in the big scheme of things. Windows 7 OS X, and this section, we're going to look at Windows 7. I just boot camped off this MacBook Pro. We look at Steam and World of Warcraft Trial. Unfortunately, didn't buy the full version, but Trial, just as good, I imagine. OS X, something to note here, Steam was recently released for the Mac. So now you can play all these fun games on your Mac. So the Mac, nobody can say the Mac doesn't have games anymore. You can play Half-Life 2, Portal, Team Fortress 2, and there's a lot more on the way. And again, the Mac, you can play, there's a World of Warcraft client for it as well. And just for silliness, when they released it, this was the image they did, or this was their little advertising thing. Thought it was pretty neat. Now, for the method of acquisition, we just use standard forensic methodology. Physical memory dump, volatile data gathering, and then we did a disk acquisition. That's kind of a high-level overview, and disk acquisition, really why people get into forensics, porn analysis. The point, system profiling. There's a wealth of information that you can be garnered. So if you see somebody, you're looking through these wild con logs, and you see somebody's logged on to 10 hours in WoW on a Saturday, it's pretty safe to assume they probably don't have much of a social life. Information with regard to general activity of the system, and account information accessible. The perfect alibi, sorry officer, is playing TF2. Now, a quick note on that. Again, when you're doing a forensic analysis, when you're doing a forensic look at something, and you have these logs, what this tells you is a particular activity took place at a particular time. Now, if you were to try to tie that to a specific user and you're just using one log entry, it's probably really not going to hold up. You probably need a lot more to go with that, particularly with like a criminal investigation. You're going to have more data points than just, one log entry that somebody connected to a game server. Where you're going to find the stuff, OS X, application, asterisk.app, user profile, and this is true for any system. Do a mem dump against it and run strings against it, and that is just a really awesome dictionary file, just kind of a tip. Windows, program files, user app data, and there's a little bit more security safeguards, I guess. It's a bit of an understatement, I suppose. Warden for WoW is installed by default. Warden is kind of it's like a piece of, I don't want to say spyware, but it's a client that enforces the EULA of Blizzard's World of Warcraft. It's a client that runs in the background. It's there. It's by default. When you install it, it's there. You don't really have much of a choice. On OS X, from what I understand, it is an optional feature. Now, for the PC OS X, this is the general location of where you're going to find the data for Steam on a Windows box. Games are stored in a single non-compressed archive, so you're not going to see a bunch of small files. You're going to see a couple of big files in the program files directory. And the con logs are going to be there. Connection log 270 asterisk asterisk. If you go back to the port list, the 27015 means that person actually connected to a game. If it was something else, con log 5,000 or whatever, it's probably not playing a game. It's probably like an update. OS X, lot of the same, and the con log directory is in a different location. User profile, library, application support, Steam logs. The connection log, for the user end, if you're connecting out, this is what you're going to see. The log starts, this is your IP address, you started connecting, and the connection complete, and it tells you, you can get a good idea for how long they played on this particular system. So if you need to prove that what actions were taking place on a system during this time, and you have these logs available, you can say, oh, well, this person was playing Left 4 Dead 2 for, 3 hours. Other notes on Steam, most of the client-side stuff, as with the PS3, the Xbox 360, the Wii, it's all encrypted. You're really not going to see a lot. It's all maintained on the server end. So none of it's stored. I know back in the day, Steam used to store your password in plain text in its install directory. They don't do that anymore. At least I hope not. They don't. Valve has an anti-cheat called VAC. Again, not much documentation on that, but it functions very much the same way as Warden does for World of Warcraft. Game configure information.